Hi and welcome to episode 2 of the Guiding Light podcast. Today we're joined by a good friend of mine, Julie Martin. Thank you for coming today,
You're
Julie.
welcome.
Wonderful to see you as ever. And I'm here as ever as well with Ben Holmes. Ben, how are you doing today?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thanks, Julie, for coming in. I'm doing really well. It's good to be back on the podcast after a small break, and look forward to getting into it.
Brilliant stuff. So, well, let's talk to you, Julie, and about, I guess, why we're here. Me and you met, I can't remember exactly when it was, but it was a few years ago now. And I'll be sharing my story on one of our podcasts coming up, but you know, I've had difficulties and now I'm in recovery for gambling harm as well as alcohol dependence, and I've got ADHD. We met through the gambling side of things because I had my addiction, but you're something that's called an affected other, which, well, you're not an affected other, you are Julie, but if you see what I mean, you're affected by somebody else's gambling. And that's what we want to discuss today, really. So do you want to just maybe give the viewers and the listeners a bit of an insight, and then me and Ben will jump in and just chat and ask you some questions at the right time.
I mean, I suppose, as I said, I am initially named an affected other because although I've never gambled, I've been affected for 25 years by my husband's gambling, along with the children and my extended family being affected. I think I met you because I must have been reaching out into the gambling harm sector for some kind of help anyway. But it was during lockdown that I can remember doing the podcast with you.
It was,
and,
and we did my other podcast. That's the other thing to say, isn't it? We met doing a different podcast.
Yeah.
So initially we met doing All Bets Are Off podcast, which is a gambling recovery podcast. But obviously we've grown through the years into good friends, and now you're on the new podcast because actually further down the line you understand
things change,
a lot of things that we want to reshare.
I mean, at that time, when I came on the podcast with you, we'd had an episode of gambling, or he'd had an episode of gambling within our home when the kids were about 8 and 11, and he'd been gambling probably for 5 or 6 years, and I had no clue, didn't know anything about it at all. It had gone into the point that 5 credit cards had all been ramped up to the max. There was probably about £70,000 worth of that. He'd taken out loans, he'd borrowed money, and I knew none of this was going on because I worked, he worked, and the general bills were being paid, but then all of a sudden there was no money. And it got to a point that I had to ask questions, and he had to tell me kind of what had happened. And it was a massive, massive shock. I didn't know what gambling was. I didn't have a clue. I mean, obviously I knew you could do the pools, knew you could do the lottery, but I've never been in a situation where I knew anything about gambling. And I just couldn't understand how somebody who seemed such a hard-working person and also a good family man could have got himself into that kind of state or situation. So unfortunately, and this will carry on, and this is probably where the conversation will change, gambling affected his mental health massively. So it wasn't just about gambling. And now I know that I'm an affected other and I'm a person who is now affected by mental health. It's not just the gambling. The gambling contributed to everything that's happened since then. But it made him a very angry person. He was always quite a bit coercive, a bit controlling, but it got worse. It sort of magnified it all. So then he became a not very nice person to be around. I went through quite a couple of years of really bad verbal and mental abuse, as well as the finance issues of having no money, having to hide it from my parents. I was so ashamed because I've always worked, I've always managed my money, I've got quite a good respect for money, brought my kids up with a respect for money, and we were at a point where I didn't even have money for food. So I didn't want to tell anyone, I was too scared. But unfortunately, due to his mental health and his anger and his issues, he ended up being arrested for threats on my life. That was all a mess because he was bailed to our own home by Essex Police at that time. So I had to then leave the home and take the kids, move to my parents. That was 25 miles away, and we couldn't get back into our home for another 3 weeks. So I missed work and they missed school for 3 weeks, and it was my daughter had literally just started senior school in year 7, so it was the worst time for her to be removed from her year, because when we did go back, she'd only been there a week, and they'd made all their friendship groups, and she just felt like a complete outsider. But anyway, we ended up getting back into the home. He was charged with threats to kill and was put on probation, and we had a restraining order to stop him coming to the house. Carried on as normal, 6 months worth. I had informed the police, I had informed the probation service and anyone else who'd spoken to me about his gambling issues, because I was hoping for all the time, and when I got in touch finally with you, I tried to get him to get help for his gambling issues, but he was in denial. He was having none of it. So I was hoping him going through these authorities, they were going to help him. But they just put him on an anger management course. They didn't address his gambling at all, and they didn't address his mental health either. We were separated for about 6 months, and I made a decision that because the kids were young, he made me promises that we'd get back together. So we did. That was a whole other strain on my mental health, because then I had to tell my parents that I was taking this guy back who I know they'd known him for 15 odd years, 20 years by then, but I'm taking this guy back who's threatened to kill me, put me into poverty, upset the kids, but I thought it was the right thing to do. We did have a really good few years. Good holidays, both worked, got some debts paid off. The house had been remortgaged to pay off other debts. So in 2018, I started to see signs again. He started to go quiet, snappy, was using his phone and laptop a lot. I tried to ignore it because I was a bit torn, because I thought if I accuse him and he's not doing it, it's going to look bad. It's going to look like I'm questioning his abstinence from gambling. But then if I don't question it and he is doing it, am I making the situation worse? So anyway, I let it go for a while. And then just before lockdown, I found out the extent of his gambling again, and it was massive. I'm not even going to go into the lies and the amounts and the whatever, but all I can say is massive. And he'd put us back in the same situation as he had before. But then lockdown happened, and we were all trapped in the house all day, every day, as everyone was. He was then at a point that he sat in one place on the settee with his laptop. He gambled and drank for 12 hours a day, just non-stop, until he collapsed and slept, and then started all over again. We basically either lived in the garden or lived upstairs, the three of us, me and the kids, because you did not want to be around him. He got increasingly angry, increasingly questioning of me, everything that I did. I chose to get a job. I chose to go back to work at this point. What I didn't say was I'd worked in a school for 10 years, and when I was coming up to my 50th birthday, my daughter was going to uni, and he said to me, why don't you give up work? Relax now. You've worked hard. You've looked after me. You've done so much. Give up work. So I said, yeah, all right, that'd be nice. Thank you, I will. Because we were doing okay. I actually realise now that he wanted me to give up work because he'd already started gambling again, and by me not having a wage, I couldn't leave. I was trapped. So we're in 2020. We've got no money because none of us are working. He's done everything he's done again. So I got a job, or the only job I could get myself at that point, and I ended up working for 2 years in a dementia care home, doing 12-hour shifts during COVID, which was one of the most horrific times and jobs of my life. But that's when I met you for the podcast. Yeah. And I did that podcast, and it was really good. And everyone said, oh, my goodness, how powerful was that? I talked about all of the stuff I've just talked about. And I thought we'd probably got to the worst point that we could ever get to. But we went through 2020. We got through, lockdown. And in December of 2020, unfortunately, again, his temper, he'd done many things before this, but he attacked me in our bedroom, wrecked the bedroom, threats again, bit of violence, and I had to call the police. I got to a point that it was my mental health was on the floor, my son's mental health was on the floor, because he was only like 15, 16 and had seen all of this happening. My daughter had then gone back to uni at this point, so they came, he was arrested, and on this occasion he was put on remand, which I still regret, because he didn't deserve this pattern of treatment. Yes, he'd done things wrong. I kept pointing out that his mental health was on the floor, and his gambling addiction had made it that way. But nobody again addressed anything. So he was inside, I think, for about 12 weeks on remand at Chelmsford, and the only person they allowed him to talk to was my daughter, because obviously there was a restraining order again for us, but she was only 20 at the time, and to hear her dad begging her and crying on the phone from remand, was a real difficult thing for her to deal with. And then he was let out. The court case, we were all built up ready for the court case. Me and him had training, because Tom's on the neurodiversity spectrum as well, and we'd had some help with the court case to get him ready on how it was going to work, and me. So we got ourselves all emotionally ready for something like the 24th of January, and I was working a shift at the dementia care home, and I got a phone call at 4:00 the day before to say that they'd cancelled the court case because of COVID, and it was now going to be July from the January. Well, I just fell apart then, because when you get yourself ready, I still loved that man, and I wasn't looking forward to going to court and potentially putting him back in prison anyway, but I was ready to do it, and then that got cancelled, put back till July. So we just had to carry on with our lives then. He continually, day in, day out, absolutely hammered my daughter with phone calls, text messages. She ended up losing her first job from university because of her mental health situation, because of not being able to cope with her dad trying to get to me. And one minute it was, please let me back, I'll be all right. Next minute, I'll kill you if you don't let me back. It was circles and circles of stuff that messed with her head. I could have reported him for all of that, but I couldn't. I felt so bad for him, and kept trying to reach out to other people to get him help, because I knew mentally he'd gone. So then we jumped to November of 2021. We're still in the same situation. The court case hadn't happened. He'd continually carried on the same path. He turned up at my daughter's house on the Sunday in Brighton. They'd had a big row. He just tried to get her in a car that she didn't want to get in, and that was rather upsetting, because I think his plan was to drive her to us. But she wouldn't get in the car, thank goodness. But then on the Wednesday night, I was coming home from my shift, and my son rang me and said, Dad's outside, he's banging on the door, the car's there, he's screaming, he wants you to come out the house. I said, well, he must know I'm not there because my car's not there, so just step away from the door, I'll ring the police. So I rung 999, and there was a flag on our house anyway because of everything that's gone on, and the police came. But before just as I literally got home, and I was trying to ring him and I couldn't get through to him, and I was panicking because I didn't know why. I couldn't get through to him because he was on the phone to the fire brigade, because Bill had set himself on fire outside our house in front of my son and everybody that was there. And then that night now, I think to me, just seems like I don't mean it light-heartedly, but it was like a Bruce Willis action movie of mental. There were air ambulance, police cars, fire engines, more people that I can remember. I wasn't allowed in the house to him. They kept me out. they worked on Bill for about an hour and a half before they took him away, before I could get to him. But my neighbour had gone in to see him, and I just don't. I mean, that whole night was just a crazy mess of. I don't know, really, can't even describe it. I know that I was out clearing up the mess at 3 o'clock in the morning that had been left behind, like 50, 60 water bottles and all the plastic and all everything. I just thought, I can't have him waking up and seeing it. So I went and got rid of it, and the police were just packing up, and a truck had come to take his car away, and this policewoman went to me, I'm ever so sorry, I'm terribly so sorry for your loss. I said, what loss? She went, oh, no, sorry, I've got that wrong. Well, obviously he'd passed away, but they weren't going to tell me because I wasn't next to kin at the time. So I had to ring round and fight. They took him to, there was a burns unit, Broomfield burns unit. They took him there, and I had to ring them myself with no help from anyone to speak to the ward sister to explain that my daughter could not have that phone call. And she thankfully was very kind to me and explained that he'd passed away at 1:30 that morning. And then I had to drive down. Well, I was driven down to Brighton the next day to break the news to my daughter. So that podcast, going back, that I did with you, that I thought our problems were there, I never even knew that was just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Like, as you say, you could never have expected what was going to happen. You were hoping that Bill would get help at that point. And
absolutely.
also, I think, recognising then as well that maybe starting to realise that you needed some support yourself, which is why you reached out. I should say your son's here today as well. That's why you're pointing over there and saying my son and that stuff. So it's really great. But yeah, what happened over that time was unthinkable. But I think what you've been talking about so far, it's so interesting to hear about his mental health and where that took him. But obviously the mental health issues that the rest of you had as well, because you mentioned about the first time it happened and when you had to leave the home for 20 weeks, he got bailed back to your house, and your daughter had to miss the start of school. You know, you said that's the worst time. It just shows that, like, mental health and then possible addictions that may form as part of it or be a coping mechanism as such for it, just cause so much devastation on the wider community.
Absolutely.
It isn't just that person, it's everyone around. And actually, as you got to the end of the story there, it shows the community, because it wasn't just yourselves. Yeah, of course, you were the ones who were mainly hit by it, but there are police there, ambulance people, neighbours.
Yeah.
It really,
I remember
really
a
spreads.
police officer saying to me that night that he'd been to some things in his time over his job, but he said, you, as in us as a family, you are going to need therapy for this. You're going to need help, because we're going to need help after this. You know, and then I didn't even, at that point, I wasn't even thinking about what he'd said. It was only since then I've never forgotten what he said, because it's true. You know, we've had to have conversations with people. I know for a fact that I get PTSD now. I could be anywhere, and if there's loud screams or a particular violent argument breaks out, I melt. I can't cope. I've had to be under the GP for on and off for the last 10, 12 years just to cope, you know, and as now my daughter is back under a mental health nurse again. She's working, she's doing so well, but it swings and roundabouts of how your life continues, you know. Tom's had some therapy. He's worked through it, but he's had to work through it in a different way because of being neurodiverse. So, you know, it's been a really difficult and roller coaster of everything. But, you know, we're still here. We're still smiling. And I've chosen to use this. And I know it sounds so cliche when you say it, because I hate the sound of it. But I have used it as a positive, because now it's my job. It's my career. It's everything I do for work. Yeah. But it's not, like you say as well, it's not just about gambling now. It's about gambling. It's about addiction as a whole. It's about mental health in every level of mental health. And it's also about all the forms of neurodiversity that lead people to going down wrong paths if they don't understand themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And another thing that I wanted to pick up on was I remember you texting me the morning after that horrendous night, actually, to say you were on your way to Brighton. I was like, look, I can't believe this, but equally, how can can you do that? Are you safe to do that? But you obviously, no, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Got to see my daughter. But I think it shows how strong you were trying to be at that point. And I know, and I think it's worth talking about this now, that then you weren't worried about any support or anything. You were thinking about others all the time. Others. And that lasted for a fair while after, actually.
I'd say good over a year. That my whole life concentrated on the kids, although they were like 16 and 20 then, but the kids, my parents and money were all I could do in my life. And I burnt myself out. It's only been to the back end of last year that I started to realise I couldn't continue on this hamster wheel of earning money and making sure everyone else was okay, because I was going lower and lower and lower down while everyone else was going up and up and up. So it was only last year that I managed to get myself with an amazing organisation called Suicide & Co. And I've just had 3 months of therapy with them, just finished literally, and amazing 14 weeks. And it was really helpful to help me put bits of my life into various different compartments now that I understand. There will always be good days and bad days. And I always say anyone's feelings about anything are justified, and there's no time limit on them. So if there are odd days, and I still will have them, that I don't want to get out of bed, I don't get out of bed. Because what states in this world do you have to do anything? What you have to do is look after yourself. And I'm not the best one at that. I am a bit of a hypocrite, but I'm learning.
You are learning.
I'm learning, and that's the good thing about it.
Oh, Julie, you've got a powerful message, and I had a bit of a tear in my eye, actually, because I can identify the night after. So my sister died of overdose, and I was present, and it's only now I'm dealing with that reality. And I remember now, like, the police, the ambulances, the corner off, the forensic team, all that kind of stuff that actually I think a lot of people look at the incident and they say, oh, poor the person that's happened, but it's actually the knock-on effect around the community. And treating addiction or mental health is a costly subject, and I think it doesn't get enough, in my opinion, enough resource to actually treat it. But actually, I think the return on investment would be huge, because it would save on other areas.
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that. Nice. It did make me cry a little bit, because it tapped into some of my stuff that's always a bit hard. What I'd like to just touch upon is, if someone else out there was going through a similar thing today, what would be like the top tips or some advice that you could give them?
As ashamed as you feel, as nervous, as scared, as worried as you feel about your situation, whether that is you are gambling or you are affected by someone's gambling, there are so many places out there you can go and get the help now. And they can help you with other charities that can help you with the mental health situation as well. Because I am an absolute NHS advocate, but this situation that I've just spoken about, I have been greatly let down by. My kids have been let down by the NHS. I've been let down by the NHS, and my husband was let down by the NHS, purely on that financial basis of, I've been told over this last 18 months, I'm too complex. They can't help me. So if you can't help me, who's going to help me? I've had to go out, find Suicide & Co., find other therapies, find other help for me. But the help is out there. You've just got to make that first step to ask someone about it and have someone help you, signpost you, show you where those things are. I used the Samaritans for years. I'm not ashamed to say it. I've been using them on and off. I have really horrible Sundays, I hate my Sundays. My son is usually at work. All my friends are with their families, so I'm usually alone. Now, I've actually started volunteer dog walking now, and I do that on a Sunday, and I love it because that makes me happy. But I used to have really bad Sundays, really bad. I'd get myself into such a dark, low place, and I used to ring the Samaritans and just have a lovely chat with whoever. And they were always there, always. And they're 24/7, you know. Do that. Don't be... They can't see you. They don't know who you are. You can say what you like to them about whatever you like, and they'll be listening to you. And I think it's knowing someone's listening is the really important bit.
They're a wonderful organisation. I use them too. I use
Amazing.
them too. Even now, you know, I used them probably about 2-3 months ago on a Monday morning. I just woke up and I was like, I'm not feeling this today. And back in the day, I would have just sat with it. And I was like, do you know what? I want to talk to somebody. Who should I talk to today? And sometimes it'll be Ben. Sometimes it'll be you. Sometimes it'll be my parents or whoever, girlfriend or my kids, whatever.
Yeah.
This morning I thought I'm going to phone the Samaritans because they're there. Yeah. They've also got an app as well, which I use sometimes. This is great, actually. And you can kind of track your feelings about how you're doing and that. And you can look back and go, do you know what, I was like this before, but I got through it. Or, do you know what, this isn't as bad as that time. Or I can really move this forward. And great organisation. Brilliant.
Yeah, I've used them too. But I think for me, the biggest thing is the shame. Like for many years, I didn't use it because of the shame that I had attached to it. And it's the greatest tool I have today. You know, I've rung them very recently, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning, you know. And they are amazing. I use Mind as well. There's some Mind counselling out there that's just as good, and they're a lovely charity and a lovely organisation. They've certainly saved me on more than one occasion.
So we've spoken a little bit about Samaritans there and like Mind as well, and organisations that can help, and the fact that, you know, like sometimes we need to go and look for the help when we don't, you know, we should be shown where it is, but sometimes we've got to look. And I know since that night when unfortunately, you know, it ended so devastatingly, your life really has then taken a change. And like you said, you work in this kind of sector and stuff now and try and help people, whether that be with gambling harm or whether that be with mental health more generally. So I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit about what's happened since that day, how you've got to where you're at?
I started work, and this is where obviously our relationship carried on with yourself and your dad and Kishan Patel, and in the beginning Ryan, with Gambling Harm, what now is known as Gambling Harm UK. We're quite Essex-based now, and that was more about awareness. You know, it wasn't necessarily the supporting, it was the awareness side of gambling, which we went into schools. And I think over the period of time I was with you full-time, we saw over 8,000 children between the age, or young adults between the ages of 15 and probably 20 within the Greater London area, bringing them training on gambling awareness, which was an amazing initiative to do. And then from there, although I still have my associations with Gambling Harm, I now work full-time for a charity called Bet No More, which is a UK-wide charity, and I work on the peer aid team, and I am what's called aftercare. So I get to talk to people once they've had some kind of clinical therapy or are over their problems or in recovery of their issues with gambling, or the affected others that come with them. But the peer aid programme within Bet No More is an amazing programme that has grown and grown and grown over the last 10 years. It was literally North London, started by Frankie Graham 10 years ago, and now it's a nationwide service that can either be referred into by ringing the National Gambling Helpline, or there's a self-referral on the website. So if anyone needed that kind of help, they could go straight onto the Bet No More website, self-refer themselves, or all the information to get 24-hour support from the National Gambling Helpline is there as well. Mental health-wise, I volunteer as an ambassador for Essex Health Watch, which Chris does as well. That's taken us through to the Fellas Fair we're going to on the 12th of March, looking at men's mental health. And I know, Ben, you're going to be there too. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to being able to see you again. So that we did that last year and it was brilliant. Doing it again this year. Obviously, men's mental health is a thing that we do. Everyone's mental health is important. But, you know, as men, more of you find it difficult to reach out and talk. So the more open we make it, the more normalised we make talking about your mental health as anybody, but especially as a man or a young boy, that's a good thing. Yeah, and then obviously Suicide and Co, Ripple, they're all suicide charities that we love and do amazing work for people. So there are so many organisations out there. If you don't even if you haven't got a laptop, use a phone. You've only got to Google on a phone. Just put in, any of these names, and they'll all be available to help someone in one way or another.
Absolutely spot on. And if I jump in a little bit there, just for a minute, because obviously peer aid as well, I've retired from peer aid just because I'm very busy and back at work and that. But actually, I'm joking. It's something I could always go back to because it's a voluntary thing. But you get trained. So I'm a peer aid supporter as well. And it's amazing because you get a qualification in being able to support people specifically through gambling harm. And that's incredible. And as you say, Frankie Graham set up Bet No More all those years ago, and then peer aid became part of it. Give a shout out to New Beginnings as well, because New Beginnings at Bet No More is specifically for ladies as well.
Yeah.
And Lisa, amazing lady who I've known for many years, that was her dream to set this up, and Frankie gave her that opportunity, and she's done that. And I know somebody called Christine. She's pretty decent, and she works on that as well.
She's not a bad lady,
she's all right,
actually.
Yeah, she's quite nice. I like her, and she works on that as well. But there's some fantastic people who do, and it's great that there is that place for women to go now, because we haven't spoken about Gamblers Anonymous here yet either, have we?
No.
And obviously that's where I started, and I still go to Gamblers Anonymous meetings and Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. But that was an amazing place to go, because suddenly I met people for the first time really who were talking about what I felt and how my head worked, and that was really incredible, because until that day I had no idea. So that's available as well. Like
saying that, as well as being, referring yourself in if you need that help, we are always looking for new peer supporters. So we continually, a couple of times a year, will have a new cohort come in of people that we want to come and train with us, so that they can then help their own recovery by helping others, so that's something as well. If you just look up Bet No More, we're always available to take on new peer supporters.
Exactly, that's a beautiful thing. It's very much like within the 12 steps actually, in Gamblers Anonymous and all the other 12 steps programs, where actually it's about taking your experience to help others, and that's really what peer aid is doing as well. So even though it's a different route, it's very similar. I always find this kind of connection, being able to ask for help and then helping others, is what's really helped me. But there's lots more. You said about the national helpline as well.
Gambling helpline, that's 24 hours a day, 365 days a week.
Really important, but also it's good to know that you can do that online as well. You don't have to call. I think that's important to say, because you could be in a house, you could be somewhere where you feel like, I can't call because there's people around. Well, in that case, maybe get on that online chat, send the message. There's always an option. There's blocking tools. There's all sorts of stuff. Talk, ban, stop. Talk, ban, stop's a good one, because it's all to do with the helpline again. Get in touch. And then the ban bit is around GamStop. So you're able to go online and block yourself from all the apps. And then you get GamBan as well, which means you're protecting yourself by putting that on your devices. And I know there's land-based stuff and all that as well. There's loads of things to talk about here, and probably do it when I chat about some of my stuff on another episode.
I think, I just want to... I've done some research for this this episode. I think that it'd be good to just touch on some of the... I don't know what your knowledge is around like the Moses scheme that apparently is out there and things like that for actual in bookmakers as well. Something that I've found very useful for reading up online, that if I was a problem gambler, that maybe that could be useful. So just could we share a bit of that for our viewers, just so that there's actually some stuff offline maybe that you can do. I know that you've done some work around banning yourself from casinos and etc. And I think that's really important.
Do you want to go?
I talk to a lot of my peers who are in recovery, and a lot of them use Moses because they're quite habitual with their gambling. So it will be a certain, even if you said 5 mile radius from where they live, there's probably a 5 mile radius of, unfortunately, 10 or 12 bookmakers that they could use periodically throughout a day, a week, whatever. and they have used Moses, and it has helped them. Not everything is perfect, and I have been told odd ways out, but I'm not going to mention them on here. But also, it's just knowing your band. And they've said to me, knowing I'm banned, I couldn't walk in there and then someone say to me, "Oi, you out." I'd be embarrassed in front of everybody. So it's knowing you've got that in place, I think, is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
And anything you can use that will prevent or hold you back from that moment of urge has only got to be a positive, you know.
Totally. And Moses is for betting shops,
Yeah.
just to be, just put that out there. And then there's one for casinos as well. And the name escapes me. I can't remember, but I've done it.
Sense.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Sense.
And I've done that. So I went into a casino with my dad at the time after saying, I've got this kind of addiction, by the way. I need help. I've got to ban myself. He came with me, took a photograph, and I'm banned from all of the land-based casinos in the UK now. So that's just fantastic. I'll never walk in again because of what you said. They're going to kick me out.
I think one of the other things I want to discuss about is that we had a conversation last night about money. And I have someone look after my money today, even though I don't struggle for gambling, because it's a blocker for me. So did you want to touch on some of the stuff that that's out there for that? Maybe there's some accounts that I know that restrict over 18. You can't use your card, or you can restrict withdrawals. Don't know if that's again something that might be useful for some of our members.
I'd use the bank of Mr. Gilham Senior. I think he's brilliant at looking after someone else's money.
Sort of be right out. Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
I bet he's got a few quid as well, so he can send it. He can send it to me if he wants.
But yeah, no, I mean, I know we've worked with banks, haven't we? There's banks now like Starling, Monzo. They're all very good at managing money. But I tend to find, and most people in recovery will say to me, having somebody else just help me to manage my money is probably, in the start of recovery, the best way to go about it. But banks are getting so much better that now you can put blocks on your credit on your bank cards that you can't use them for any kind of gambling transactions. So if you tried to use them for it, it just wouldn't let the money go through. And that's like even bingo halls or something, anywhere that it is the thing, it looks like it's a gambling thing, it just stops it working. So they're quite good.
They're really important, the gambling blocks, I think, and lots of banks do that, and most high street banks are doing that, and the online ones as well. I think the other things that are really important is that kind of asking for help, because we do feel ashamed, I suppose. Sometimes people do. I was very happy at the start to give mine away, actually. It got to a place where I wanted to, but I understand why people might not want to. And, this doesn't just relate to gambling. This can relate to any time when you're overspending or whatever. And ADHD.
I was going to say, just thinking about it now, ADHD and shopping addiction.
Yeah.
We're going through the whole lot here. So how many people I now know, men and women, shopping addiction with ADHD. So it's not necessary, it's still wasting money and buying a whole heap of stuff they don't need. But they need someone to manage their money through that.
Yeah, and for me, it's about not... so for me, it was about, at the start, making sure I was safe. Enough barriers in place, being safe. And what's happened over time, because I would meet my dad every month to go through all of my accounts and stuff. For me, it wasn't about not knowing what's there. Now, for some people it is, I understand that. For me, it wasn't. It's about me getting back to being able to live a normal life. Okay, so nowadays, I have a lot more control over everything, but my dad still oversees that. I send him my bank account every Friday. So he just looks at it. He knows. He checks against his big spreadsheet, because he loves a spreadsheet, my dad. I've been really lucky with that. But equally, I've wanted to do it, and it's important to find somebody who wants to help you, I think.
I think it's important that you take that step. I found it extremely embarrassing to start, but I find it really empowering today. So something I've done is I've stopped the withdrawal limits to £10, so I can only get out £10 because my using obviously was a lot of cash in hand through drug dealers. So I physically want to stop myself getting that money, and I have a Monzo account where someone else has that app and it pings up on their phone when I transact something. And it's not really what I use that for. It's not because I want someone to look after my money. I just want to be a bit more accountable. And if someone sees odd, it's that other barrier that someone will ring me and go, you've just spent 50 quid or 40 quid or whatever it is. I've still got access to money. I've just got the controls around it. I think one thing that I personally would like to mention, if I can, is I've used Step Change Charity. And I think for anyone out there that's really struggling, I know, speaking to you guys and some others, gambling particularly is a very big financial problem for a lot, but a lot of other mental health and addictions cause financial harm. I just wanted to signpost Step Change Charity that they have absolutely helped me massively to get out of debt, and put plans in place, and just to make me feel a bit more okay. I think with mental health, like we beat ourselves up quite a lot naturally through little mistakes and things, and what they've done is alleviate some of that and think, do you know what, they've got a plan in place, I'm sticking to it, it's paying over a period of time, and I feel more happy. And also that sympathetic ear, like when I rang up, I wasn't judged. I've got this debt, I've got that debt, I've got this, I don't know what to do, help me, because I was broken. I couldn't deal with life, let alone my finances, and someone just said, okay, it's all right.
And do you know what? Like, debt's a thing. Lots of people have debt, It's a thing in the world these days. There's so much credit. People have debt, whether they've had an addiction, whether they've got a mental health issue, or just because they've overspent sometimes, you know what I mean? And actually, I think what's really important, and especially when you come into recovery from addiction maybe, is try not to overpay your debt back and stuff, because it puts so much pressure on you that for some, it can then push you back to where you were at because you're so desperate to get out of it again. So talking to somebody like Step Change and getting your budgeting right and all that kind of stuff is really important. So you can pay back what you can afford at the time while still being able to live a life, which is very important.
So one thing I just want to ask Julie is, looking back now, and that's really hard, and it's really hard to look back, would you have done anything differently today than you would have then, that you think if someone else is going through that they could maybe make that change? You've mentioned reaching out, but would you do anything different?
I spent a lot of the last year, 18 months, trying to work that out. Obviously, because of my personal circumstance, was there anything I could have done? Because I wasn't sitting comfortable with that could have potentially stopped that happening and him taking his own life in that way. But genuinely, I think with all the talking I've done and the people I've spoken to, and I was lucky, I was already working in the sector. No, for me, I don't think there was anything else I could have done. I couldn't have asked anyone else or done enough for him. I wish I could have changed the situation. I wish, but I can't. So I have to live now knowing that everything I did do, I did for the right reasons, and I cannot be held responsible for someone else's actions. But in saying that, if you are in those experiences or having those experiences now, the main thing you have to do is make that change. Do the thing we've all been talking about, and it's reaching out. Yeah. Just making that first email, referral, phone call, speak to a friend, whatever you're comfortable with. There are so many options, so many people. You've got to ask for that bit of help and not be ashamed of honesty. I would not be here now in doing what I'm doing if I hadn't chosen to be so honest about my feelings, about what I've been through. It's not nice to sit and say, I have mental health issues. But if I don't say it, who else is going to say it? If you two don't say it, if young people don't say it, we're not normalising it and we're not helping others. No, so,
absolutely.
Do you think the industry, so something like I've viewed, and I'm becoming more aware because, going on this journey and knowing Chris and a few of the other guys and knowing the charity Gambling UK Harm, I've started to become more aware of gambling, really. I think a lot of people don't necessarily see it as a problem. No. What I've noticed is quite a lot of younger generation are using it. Like sixth form. I was in near where I live the other day, and there's a row of bookmakers and a sixth form, and people were going in and out with their uniform. Now they're obviously 18 because you can be now, right? Into A levels and that, but they're all coming out with these slips. Do you think the industry can do more around young?
Absolutely, always, absolutely. My bugbear is the advertising, television, radio, and sport
Yeah.
around football. You know, you take your children, so many dads, mums, families take their children to football games, their teams, no matter how big or small they are, you know, from very young ages, and all around their grounds, you know, if you're looking at championship upwards, all around their grounds, in the programmes, anywhere, there's going to be gambling adverts. So we're normalising it to children before they're even old enough to think about gambling. Then you turn on the television from 10 o'clock in the morning, this morning, Loose Women, Foxy Bingo, this, that, you know. I personally have stopped watching what I call, because I'm 53 and quite old, live television, because I won't do the adverts. I can't abide the amount of gambling adverts and the famous, well-known, well-liked faces that are in those gambling adverts. So I refuse to watch, you know, I just watch catch-up and stuff now and avoid it at all cost.
It's interesting, though, because I watch a lot of catch-up as well, and there are certain channels where...
It's still in there. No, it's still in there, you're
all
right.
four and that. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't care if I say that.
No,
All four I was watching the
you're
other
right.
day, and one after the other, it's gambling adverts, and you think, why are you doing this, you know?
I mean, I spoke to you, I think last week or the week before, I was watching football, and in the half-time interval that's 15 minutes, it's actually only 13 minutes of actually TV, right? There was 11 gambling adverts.
Yeah.
And I found it, like, from someone looking outside in, I found it, whoa, you know. So it's really interesting to sort of see that viewpoint. So I've just got a couple more, Julie.
Absolutely.
Obviously, you work for Bet No More. I think for me, when I reached out, I was really nervous. So is it completely anonymous and that? Can you pick the phone line up without being...
Not if you want support, because obviously then you need to go through like a triage process, and you will have to give your details. So to go through to get peer support or something like that, or clinical therapy or whatever you need, obviously you do need to give your details. But if you're just at a place that you just need to literally talk it through, you can still have a conversation with the National Gambling Helpline.
Yeah.
If you're not quite at the point that you're ready to give that information up, or like we've said, we've mentioned the Samaritans, we've mentioned Mind, they all now have good knowledge or better knowledge of gambling issues. So again, it's the start of the process of having that conversation. And then once you've had that initial conversation, you might feel, you know, more confident the next time to think, right, yeah, I do actually need help and I do need to reach out. So, you know, it's possible to do things anonymously in the beginning, but if you're actually looking for that support you need on a weekly basis, you're going to need to obviously give details.
But it's important to say as well, like, they give the information to the organisation who are going to support.
And that is totally...
Then that is, you know, that isn't shared. That
no,
isn't shared. That
no,
is
it never goes
protected,
anywhere.
So.
Yeah.
I think it's important. So for me, when I rang up originally for my addictions, I'd done the anonymous route.
Yeah.
And then I realised very quickly I had a problem with, you know, drink and drugs and etc. And then I chose the next step for me was getting information out. So, you know, I wanted just to sort of share that, because you can make contact originally, and I think that's a really important step. What I found, my experience, the other person on the phone was so lovely. I wanted to give my details more to the point, because I was at that point for help. One of the other things, I was doing some more investigation on this episode. Could I tap into some of your knowledge around some of the regulatory tools within the accounts on gambling that maybe that people don't necessarily use? I think they call it responsible gambling tools online, but I think it'd be, I don't know what your knowledge is on that, but is there anything that you can offer anyone support on that to maybe limit?
Do you want me to go? You want to go?
Yeah, because I've got my own version of what Chris might say is available, but you carry on.
Cool. So, I mean, I think the first thing to say is, there are tools available. I look at them like this. I think they're very good and useful, and they should be used if somebody is going to gamble, because gambling will always be around. Not everybody will become like I was. But the industry do offer things such as setting time limits, and you can set limits on your amount that you can put in. So you could set, you can set a deposit limit basically, and that kind of stuff. So do it. If you're going to go out there and you really want to gamble responsibly, and it's not an issue for you, just do it. Why not? For me, it's very much like saying, here's my shopping list. This is my shopping budget. Therefore, I'm going to go and spend that. Do the same with your gambling.
Yeah.
However, and there are things like they will talk. Take time to think is the thing now, and I like to say, well, yeah, I tried to take time to think, but at the same time, you as a gambling operator could have taken some time to think, and maybe not taken so much away from me, not taken so much of my life away. I'm not really talking money here; they took a lot, but my life. Maybe don't design such an addictive product that I'm sitting on through the night time. So yeah, there are things that can be done. Safer gambling tools that I think should be used. They're there for a reason. They can help people, but then the gambling industry needs to do far more to help people who are very obviously struggling, and it's a very difficult place because their products are designed to be addictive. They want people to continue to play. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's a very crazy industry where you're taking in people like me, taking all their money, swallowing them up, spitting them out, and bringing in new people. Hence the advertising and stuff.
I think we had a chat about that, and it's really tough because I suppose if people in England pubs, if they offered every alcoholic, buy 1 pint, get 4 free. Because that's essentially what some of these bets do. I think I see the other day, deposit a certain amount and you get a certain amount free. And I looked at it, because I think I rang you and laughed, but I was getting double the amount of free bets as I was inputting if I was going to go down that route. If I walked into a pub and said, I want to buy 1 beer, but can you give me 5? There'll probably be there'll be a lot of media storm around that and a lot of people uprise, but I think that gambling gets left behind a lot with that.
And that's because it's still not acknowledged as the addiction. And the thing is, totally agree with Chris about the tools. I have never ever said I want gambling banned. Exactly like I would never ever say I want all pubs shut.
Yeah.
Because there are millions of people in this country who can both gamble and drink responsibly. What we need to protect are those people that can't.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, they are not being protected. I know for a fact, the more my husband, especially during lockdown, the more my husband gambled, the more he lost, the more he was given. He was given up to £5,000 at a time, free, to gamble with. Because they know once he's lost all his money, if they don't give him that $5,000, which he will probably win a bit on, lose a bit, they're going to lose him for the day. So that's the type of thing that's wrong. And also, the timeouts. He'd be on one site, get a timeout, so he'd just move to the next site, and then move to the next site, and then by that time he could go back to that one again. So there are good tools, and there are responsible gamblers. And I'm not worried about them. I want people to enjoy their lives and have that bit of fun. It's not about that.
Yeah.
It's about those who are need protecting for mental health issues, neurodiversity issues, or just general looking for escapism because they've got issues with their life.
And that's a really good point because it changes through lifetimes as well and through what you're going through and based upon the kind of products you're using. So, yes, you can get addicted to horse racing. Yes, you can get addicted to dog racing, but usually you'd be doing a combination. But those products are different to other products that may have been developed, such as slot machines that are going round and round and round really, really quickly, very, very fast. Somebody like me with ADHD now realises my dopamine's low. And I'm getting hits all the time if I'm doing that. I didn't like gambling, but I kept doing it because it quietened my head. And it was those products. It was the slot machines. It was the roulette wheel going round and round really quickly, far quicker than if you were actually in a casino playing it. So maybe I could have been a gambler just betting on horses all my life. Who knows? And never have actually become addicted. But once I used a different product, then it happened, and it happened really quickly like that. And I think that's a really important thing to consider as well.
I think what you said about the tools is I spoke to you yesterday, but even if you don't think you've got a problem and you are that reasonable gambler, that moderate gambler that can gamble, I still think that after I spoke to you yesterday about them, actually, why not put them in? Because if you're that reasonable gambler anyway, you're never going to go over that boundary anyway. So actually, for me, you know, I would do that if I was a moderate gambler, you know, because it makes sense, right? You know, it's really interesting because I refer to alcohol a lot, you know, because that's my number one drug, shall we say? It wasn't the one I ended up on, but you know, and it's really important because I don't think there is enough done around gambling. Like, you know, you mentioned something there that's you know, triggered my brain. They gave him loads of free bets because they didn't want to lose him for the day. You know, if I couldn't stand up in a pub, I'd be thrown out. At least I'd be thrown out, right? When I'm done, I've got no money and I'm finished and I've had my 14 beers, I'm out of that pub.
And it closes, right?
And it closes. You know, what's saying there, what you said is like, wow, like actually, it's 24 hours if you can finance it.
Yeah, it's 24
scarily,
hours. It's
you know?
24 hours because it's online. Some places are open 24 hours, or you know. And the other thing is, just about the alcohol thing as well, because as you know, for me, that was my life. The alcohol, you know, the gambling came on top, and the thing about the advertising with both, I think, you know, some of the alcohol advertising isn't okay, but the difference in my mind with the alcohol and the gambling advertising is they are telling me something on a gambling advert, which is saying, do this now. These are the odds. They're going to change very soon. So if you don't do this, you're going to miss out on it. An advert for a new bottle of vodka or something, yeah, okay, it might make me think, oh, I quite fancy that vodka, but I've got to go to a shop and get it, or I've got to go on Deliveroo and get it delivered to me. But it doesn't say, this bottle of vodka, by the way, if you don't get this now, in the next 2 minutes, it's going to disappear forever. That's the difference for me. It's that tone of the adverts and how kind of aggressively the gambling industry try to reel people in.
Yeah, I can identify with that. I'm a salesman, right? I do it for my job, and it's exactly that for me. I find it, you know, when I look at it, that's what I'll do to my customers. The price is going up tomorrow. I've only got one available. Yeah, you need to do it today. All my signalling to that customer is you need to sign now. You know, and that is what I see a lot of those adverts at. You know, that football one I see the other day. I don't want to trigger people, so I don't want to talk about it. But it was like an advanced boost halftime thing. I think it was the next goal scorer. I think I rung you about it because it sort of pinged me because since I've been looking at the episode, I've been looking more at gambling, right? But it was the next goal scorer was X odds, now X. It was quite a big jump as well. So that, and I could see the incentive for some people out there, like because I'm a salesman. That's what I would do. It's 50 quid. Actually, I'll do it for 35 if you do it now, right? I could see that mechanism and that sort of advertising that really does stick with me because that ain't. To me, that's not designed for the normal moderate gambler, that type of advert. That's designed for one gambler only and predominantly male watching football.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely
that fundamentally for me, that's what I see. So it's really interesting, and I think that there needs to be in my opinion, a change in some of the advertising that goes out. You know, I fear for my daughter. My daughter's 13. But just the amount of bingo adverts there. They're glamorising it more to the woman. They've clicked on, like, it's all, you know, funny characters on bingo and etc. But, you know, I was speaking to someone the other day and, like, you know, they spend quite a lot on that stuff. I mean, I didn't think that you could spend that much on bingo, if I'm honest.
It's not just the gambling. It's the ones that you start off, like, online, like the Yu-Gi-Oh games. And, I mean, I'm not great at these kind of things, but it's the children's games that they start off playing free, but then they get offered the loot boxes and the things that they can buy to enhance that game or enhance their profile or enhance their character. So before you know it, you know, 11-year-olds are sitting playing what you consider to be an age-appropriate, great game, but they've nicked your credit card and they've done £500 on loot boxes. And that's happening more and more.
My daughter's doing it now, and she rang me the other day for some money to unlock something for a game, right? And for me, what I see that do is it's conditioning the brain for a reward of winning prize from a young age.
Yeah.
It's embedded in a young age there.
That's it.
You know, and it's almost like when I took my first drink. I took that first drink and it opened me to abuse alcohol and drugs. You know. Anyway, I didn't give it to her, but like, you know, I'm becoming more aware of it. It's very subtle, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
But people don't realise.
What was her response when you said no?
She was upset, angry. She texted me actually saying, "Oh, Dad, please," like the next day, because she wants a. What I found with me, and this is just addiction, right, and mental health, is I want instant reward.
Yep.
And I'll do anything. When I'm feeling bad, I will do anything to get a reward. Absolutely anything. And I have disregard for anyone else around me, finance, people, places, whatever it is, because I need my fix. I need my fix, you know. Thankfully, you know, you're doing some amazing work with your stuff. I've got a 12-step fellowship in my life that's changed my life. Obviously, got Chris, and I've got a good support network around me. So, yeah, I think from an addict's point of view or a mental health point of view, you know, it's really tough. It's really tough for us. And I think, you know, that is why there needs to be some more protection. You know, me too, by the way. I'm not against drinkers, and I'm not against gamblers, you know, and
That's lucky.
you know, that's great, isn't it? But
Yeah.
like for people that can, I've got friends that can do, you know, £10 a week, you know,
exactly.
take it or leave it, great, no problems, you know. I think we had a conversation yesterday, and I think that I wanted to share this on to our viewers, that whenever you reach the problem, it's a really tough thing to identify, and I think we come up with when you spend or drink more than you intend to, actually. And that could be if you choose to spend 5 and you're spending 10, you've read the line. If you're going to the pub and you're going to have 3 pints with your mates and you have 6, you know, that's a red line for me, and you've extended that. You know, and I think that's really important that we share that, because I think people get a perception in the brain that the alcoholic's the guy that drinks 25 beers, or the problem gambler is the guy that does 40 grand a year. But actually, if £1,000 a year is too much for you, you've got a problem. If 3 beers is too many for you, you've got a problem, in my opinion. I think that's really important. So, you know, if you're out there and you're
It's all
struggling,
about your head, isn't it? It's all about your mind. Why are you doing it? Why, if you've said you're going to have 3 beers, if you had 4 or 5? It's not to say sometimes you can't change your mind, because your friends might say, "Oh, we're going to stay out for an extra game of football." Fair enough. But you know what? If it's because you're sitting there and you're like, "Oh, I said 3, but 4's all right, 5's all right, another 2 don't count." That's the kind of stuff that will go through my head. And then you're like, "Oh, hold on a minute."
And then you're doing that more frequently.
Yeah.
So you stopped just popping out for the 2, and every time you go out, it's 6.
Yeah.
And then it escalates from there.
Exactly.
You know.
Progressive. Julie, as ever, thank you so much for spending time with me. That's the main thing. I love it. And thank you for
always
coming on our
enjoy it.
podcast today. Honestly, though, really appreciate it. And I think we've had a great discussion. You do so much now for other people, and I'm really glad that you do so much more to look after yourself as well. I think that's one of the biggest lessons for everyone actually here. Look after yourself first before you can look after anybody else. So you make sure you keep doing that. But is there anything else you want to maybe say at the end of the podcast before we finish off?
I'm really pleased that this conversation went further than gambling, you know, because as much as that is my passion and my thing, and where I help people every day, I just think that the mental health issue and everything else that comes with it is something we need to start including and talking about a lot more. So that's been a lovely opportunity to do that today. So thank you. It has been a pleasure.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Julie. Thank you, Ben, for being here with me again. And I'll see you next time. And you can watch the next one.
Yeah.
That's all right. And to everybody who's been listening or watching today, thank you for joining us again. We hope you found this of use. And do give us a follow on Instagram or X or Twitter, whatever it is. I don't know what it is now, but the one that is an X. So it's probably called X. And check out our website. Please come back and listen to us soon. And do reach out if you want to ask us anything at all. Speak to you soon. Bye.
As we wrap up another amazing and inspiring episode of The Guiding Light, remember, although your journey is unique, you most certainly are not alone. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to explore, reach out please across our socials or via our website www.theguidinglight.co.uk. Until next time, take care of yourself.